It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Niccolò Machiavelli. At first glance, this line feels ruthless, almost cruel. But if you dare to look deeper, you'll see what Machiavelli was really revealing. The world does not reward weakness. Power, influence, and even love itself all are commanded by those who understand human psychology at its darkest core. And yet, most men today have been taught the exact opposite. You've been told to be endlessly kind, available, expressive, vulnerable. You've been told to give everything in order to be loved. And what has it brought you? Rejection, ghosting, confusion. You see, you've been playing a game, but with rules designed to make you lose. What if I told you that there are 5 hidden rules that most men will never know? Rules women never say out loud, but instinctively respond to. Rules that, once mastered, flip the script entirely. With these rules, you won't be the one chasing anymore. They'll chase you, they'll beg for your attention, and the power you feel will be undeniable. Let's begin with the first law. Rule 1, the silent power. Every human interaction has an invisible hierarchy. Beneath the surface of smiles, jokes, and casual conversations, there's always a silent struggle. Who is leading and who is following? Most men never see this. They focus on words, on gestures, on superficial details. But Machiavelli taught that appearances are just a mask. The real game is hidden underneath. Think about it. When a truly powerful man walks into a room, something happens. Conversations pause, eyes shift, people lean in. He doesn't need to speak loudly. He doesn't need to beg for attention. His very presence shapes the environment. That is silent power, and it is the foundation of attraction. Why women respond to power, not words. You've probably been told that women want compliments, endless validation, constant reassurance. But here's the Machiavellian truth. What women crave is not words, it's presence. Words can be faked. Flattery is cheap. But presence, command, and unshakable self-possession, that cannot be faked. And women feel it instantly. A man who doesn't nervously explain himself, who doesn't try to fill every silence, who doesn't laugh just to gain approval. This man communicates one thing. He cannot be controlled, and the man who cannot be controlled becomes the man every woman secretly desires. The mirror of power. Here's the ruthless twist. When you embody power, you don't just project strength, you hold up a mirror to her. She begins to question herself. Am I good enough for him? Do I deserve his attention? The more you withhold neediness, the more she invests. The more she invests, the more she values you. And the more she values you, the harder she chases. Machiavelli knew this centuries ago. He wrote that men should never explain themselves too much, because to explain is often to submit. Think about that. The moment you feel the urge to justify yourself, you've already surrendered the higher ground. A man who commands respect doesn't beg for it. He doesn't explain it. He simply embodies it. Storytelling. Hook, the king and the pretender. Imagine a king and a pretender. The pretender tries desperately to prove his worth. He flatters the crowd, laughs too hard, and tries to win everyone's approval. The people smile at him politely, but they never take him seriously. Then the king arrives. He speaks little. He listens more. When he finally does speak, his words cut like steel, because they are few, measured, deliberate. He doesn't ask for respect. He doesn't need to. The pretender performed for them. The king made them perform for him. This is the difference between men who chase and men who are chased, between men who beg for validation and men who embody gravity. Biology never lies. Now, let's drag this into the modern world. Attraction is not about being the funniest guy or the most handsome or even the richest. Those things can help, yes, but they are secondary. What women truly respond to, biologically, psychologically, instinctively, is certainty. A man who cannot be shaken, a man who stands rooted while others wobble, a man who could walk away at any moment, not out of cruelty, but out of sovereignty. He does not orbit her world. She must qualify to enter his. That's why silent power is magnetic, because it flips the usual dynamic. Instead of you asking, "Do you want me?" she starts asking herself, "Am I good enough for him?" The calm storm. Here's what most men don't understand. True power is not flamboyant. It's not about shouting, being the loudest voice, or constantly showing off. True power is silent. It is the calm before the storm. It is the steady gaze that makes others lower their voices. It is the confidence of a man who knows where he's going, even if no one else understands the path yet. This kind of power is irresistible because it cannot be faked. A woman might be attracted to a handsome face, but she becomes obsessed with the man whose silence makes her wonder what he's thinking. That's the man she cannot toy with. That's the man whose approval becomes priceless, because it cannot be easily earned. The first shift. So here's your first shift. Stop trying to impress. Stop trying to explain. Stop trying to prove. Instead, cultivate silence. Cultivate presence. Speak less, but let your words carry weight. Move deliberately, as if you are always 10 steps ahead. Listen more than you talk. Not because you are passive, but because you are calculating. This is how you begin to radiate the one thing more seductive than beauty, money, or charm. Command. Cliffhanger into Rule 2. But command alone is not enough. Because even the most powerful presence can fade if it becomes too familiar. And this leads us to the second hidden rule. The principle that makes kings, brands, and even ordinary men unforgettable. It is not abundance that fuels desire. It is absence, scarcity. And once you master it, you will stop chasing attention and start making others chase you. Machiavelli once said, "Men forget more easily the death of their father than the loss of their patrimony." In other words, people fear loss more than they cherish gain. And this brings us to Rule 2. Scarcity fuels desire. Desire thrives on what it cannot have. If Rule 1 teaches you to radiate power, Rule 2 teaches you to manage distance. Because here is the brutal truth. When something is too available, it loses its value. Think about it. The banquet table filled with endless food excites you at first. But after the third or fourth serving, you no longer care. Now imagine a rare delicacy that appears only once a season. People fight for it, talk about it, crave it long after it's gone. Humans are wired this way. We don't dream of what we can touch anytime. We dream of what we cannot fully grasp. In attraction, this principle is sharper than a blade. Why most men fail? Most men destroy desire with good intentions. They believe loyalty means being constantly available. They believe showing devotion means answering instantly, texting endlessly, never leaving her alone for a second. But in reality, their eagerness suffocates mystery. It erases tension. It strips away the one thing that makes a woman dream about a man when he's not around: his absence. Availability feels good for a moment, but quickly becomes predictable, and predictability is the death of obsession. Machiavelli's lesson on scarcity. Machiavelli warned rulers never to hand out rewards too freely. If a prince gave everything to his people at once, gratitude would vanish and entitlement would grow. Better to distribute slowly, strategically, in fragments, so each gift felt like a treasure. In the same way, if you give your time, your words, your presence without pause, she stops valuing it. But if you withdraw, if you make yourself scarce, if you appear only at chosen moments, you transform from ordinary into unforgettable. Because when you disappear, her imagination begins to work. and the imagination is far more powerful than reality. The psychology of absence. Here's what happens inside her mind. When you're always there, she knows exactly who you are. There is no puzzle, no tension, no reason to chase. But when you're gone, her thoughts begin to spiral. What is he doing? Who is he with? Does he even think about me? The more she wonders, the more she invests. The more she invests, the more she needs closure. And the more she needs closure, the more she chases. Absence forces her to imagine you, and imagination builds desire more powerfully than constant presence ever could. Storytelling. Hook. The ghost and the lover. Picture. Two men. The first showers her with texts, memes, calls, constant affection. At first she smiles, then she grows numb. Eventually, she feels nothing at all. His love is like background noise. The second appears powerfully, makes her laugh, leaves a strong impression, and then vanishes. Hours pass, days pass. He doesn't explain, he doesn't apologize. His silence lingers like perfume in the air. Guess which man she obsesses over? The one she can't reach, the one who left a void, the one her imagination cannot stop filling. This is the paradox of scarcity. You become louder in absence than others do in presence. Scarcity in modern life. Think of luxury brands. Why do people spend 10 times more on a handbag or a watch when there are cheaper, even better options? Because it's rare, limited, difficult to obtain. The same principle applies to your time and presence. If it's unlimited, it's worthless. If it's rare, it becomes priceless. Most men act like fast food, cheap, easy, always available. The Machiavellian man acts like a fine wine, rare, selective, and worth waiting for. The strategic dance scarcity doesn't mean disappearing forever. That's neglect, not strategy. Scarcity is a dance. Appear just enough to ignite interest, then withdraw to let it grow. You reply, but not instantly. You give attention, but not endlessly. You show warmth, but not obsession. You become unpredictable. She never fully knows what you'll do next, and that unpredictability hooks her deeper. Machiavelli wrote that the greatest leaders always kept people uncertain. Why? Because uncertainty forces attention, and attention is power. The inversion of power scarcity flips the script. When you're too available, she feels like the prize. But when you're scarce, you become the prize. She feels she must qualify for your time. She must earn her place in your world. And here's the dark truth. The more effort she expends to reach you, the more she values you. Once she invests, she becomes entangled. Detachment becomes harder. Desire turns into obsession. Practical application. So how do you embody scarcity without falling into games or cruelty? Guard your time. Not every call deserves an answer. Not every message deserves a reply. Be in motion. Have a mission, hobbies, ambitions that consume your energy. Show her you have a life beyond her. Give unpredictably. Surprise her with presence, then vanish. Let her feel both the warmth and the chill. Never beg. Scarcity collapses the moment you chase. Remember, scarcity is not about punishing her. It's about proving to yourself that you are sovereign. You do not need to be endlessly available to be valuable. Cliffhanger into Rule 3. Scarcity makes her lean in. It makes her chase. But once she comes closer, another battlefield begins, the battlefield of frame, because absence creates desire, but presence creates conflict, and whoever controls the frame controls the entire dynamic. And that's exactly what Rule 3 is about, the law that separates leaders from followers, kings from beggars. The one who controls the frame does not just win the interaction, he wins before it even begins. Machiavelli once warned, "Men are so simple and so much creatures of habit that he who seeks to deceive will always find someone who will allow himself to be deceived." What he meant is this: People rarely see reality. They see the frame that reality is presented in. And that brings us to Rule 3. Whoever controls the frame controls the game. The invisible battlefield. Most men believe power is determined by what you say, how charming you are, or how impressive your resume looks. But the truth is, those things only matter if you control the context, the frame. The frame is the invisible set of rules that determines how the interaction is understood. It defines who leads, who follows, who gives value, and who receives it. If you are not controlling the frame, you are trapped inside hers. And once you are inside her frame, you are reacting, you are adjusting, you are subordinate. This is why so many men feel powerless. They never set the terms. Storytelling hook. The date. Imagine this. You go on a date. She arrives late. A weak man gets nervous, apologizes for no reason, or snaps in irritation. In both cases, he has already stepped into her frame. He has made her behavior the center of the interaction. But the man who controls the frame doesn't react. He greets her warmly, carries on with calm composure, and resumes the world he was already living. His time is valuable. His mood is unshaken. His frame remains intact. This unsettles her more than anger ever could. Because deep down, she realizes she doesn't control him. He controls himself. And in relationships, as in politics, sovereignty is irresistible. Machiavelli's lesson on sovereignty. Machiavelli advised rulers never to let others dictate the terms of their rule. Once you allow an enemy, a rival, or even the people themselves to set the narrative, you've already lost. He admired Cesare Borgia not just for his ruthlessness, but for his ability to impose his reality. Even when fortune turned against him, Borgia projected calm authority. He never let others define him. He defined them. The same applies in personal relationships. If she dictates the tone, she cannot respect you. If she sets the rules, she cannot follow you. Because here is the brutal truth. Women do not submit to men who submit to them psychologically. They submit to the man whose world feels stronger than their own. The psychology of frame control. Frame control is not about shouting or being domineering. It is about conviction. The man who speaks in statements, not endless questions, signals certainty. The man who listens calmly without rushing to fill silence signals composure. The man who disagrees without fear signals sovereignty. These micro-signals create a psychological magnetism. She begins to feel herself drawn into your world. She starts to compare other men to you, and she cannot shake your influence because your frame is more grounded than hers. A weak man adjusts. A strong man anchors. The trap of explanation. Here's where most men lose. They believe they can win respect by explaining themselves, by proving their worth, by trying to justify their actions. But Machiavelli despised rulers who over-explained. He knew the moment a prince defended himself too much, he exposed weakness. The same applies here. Every time you justify, you step into her frame. Every time you plead, you collapse your sovereignty. Frame control is not about proving. It is about imposing, not by force, but by calm, unshakable presence. Storytelling. Hook, the silent leader. Think of a meeting room. Two men argue endlessly, raising their voices, trying to dominate through volume. Then the CEO, calm and collected, says one sentence. Here's how we're moving forward. The room falls silent. The debate ends. His frame swallows theirs whole. Why? Because conviction is louder than chaos. The same principle applies on dates, in arguments, in relationships. While others get dragged into emotional storms, the Machiavellian man remains unmoved. His stillness radiates strength, and that strength commands attention without demanding it. Women and the frame test. Women will always test the frame, sometimes subtly, sometimes directly. They might disagree just to see if you wobble. They might tease to see if you get flustered. They might challenge your words to see if you defend yourself nervously. Most men fail these tests. They react emotionally, explain too much, or collapse into apologies. But the man who holds his frame calmly passes every test without effort. And here's the paradox. The very act of testing you is what deepens her attraction when you pass. Because by holding your frame, you prove yourself as the stronger reality. Frame in relationships and leadership. Frame control extends beyond one-on-one interactions. It is the principle behind leadership itself. In politics, a leader who frames crisis as opportunity inspires loyalty. In business, a leader who frames setbacks as challenges motivates his team. In relationships, a man who frames emotional storms as irrelevant shows strength. People are drawn to those who define reality with conviction, and women are no exception. The seduction of sovereignty. Frame control doesn't force, it invites surrender. When you remain calm, composed, and grounded in your own worldview, she begins to adjust herself to you. Not because you demanded it, but because your frame feels more solid than hers. This is where attraction transforms into submission, not through force, but through psychological gravity. And yet, even the strongest frame can collapse if you lose control of yourself emotionally, which leads us to the next law, because the battlefield is not just external, it is internal. Cliffhanger into Rule 4. If Rule 3 is about shaping the frame, Rule 4 is about mastering the self, because the moment you let emotions control you lose the frame. The moment you bleed feelings recklessly, you lose the mystery that makes you powerful. This is why the next rule is perhaps the most ruthless of all: emotional detachment. The weapon that separates the ordinary man who is ruled by his feelings from the Machiavellian man who rules his feelings. Machiavelli believed the greatest ruler was not the one who conquered nations, but the one who conquered himself. Because if you cannot master your own emotions, you will be mastered by the emotions of others. This brings us to Rule 4, emotional detachment. The fortress within, most men collapse not because they lack looks, charm, or even money, but because they let their emotions run wild. At the first sign of affection, they overshare. At the first sign of distance, they panic. They confuse openness with strength and vulnerability with value. But here's the Machiavellian truth. The man who reveals too much too soon destroys the very tension that creates desire. Machiavelli warned rulers never to expose their fears and weaknesses because enemies would exploit them. The same is true in attraction. Once a woman knows exactly how much power she has over your emotions, she loses interest. The mystery dies. The powerful man builds a fortress around his emotions. He is not numb, he feels deeply, but he reveals selectively, and that restraint makes him irresistible. Storytelling hook. The two suitors. Imagine two men competing for the same woman. The first wears his heart on his sleeve. He texts her paragraphs, begs for reassurance, panics when she doesn't reply. At first she finds him sweet, but soon his emotions overwhelm her. His predictability kills the mystery. The second man feels just as much, but he doesn't reveal everything. He listens calmly, smiles mysteriously, and never seems shaken. She cannot read him. She doesn't know how much he cares or what he's truly thinking, and it drives her wild. She invests more and more, desperate to unlock him. Which man obsesses her? The unreadable one, because in desire, the question mark is always more powerful than the exclamation point. Emotional balance as power. To be emotionally detached does not mean to be cold. It means never being dragged into extremes. If she pulls away, you don't chase. If she tests you, you don't explode. If she withdraws, you don't collapse. If she cries, you don't crumble. Your calmness unsettles her precisely because most men react, most men plead, most men fold. But when you remain steady, you communicate the one thing women crave above all: certainty. And certainty is intoxicating. Machiavelli's prince and the modern man. Think of Cesare Borgia, the ruthless Duke Machiavelli admired. He betrayed allies, executed rivals, and reshaped Italy's power structure, all with terrifying composure. His strength wasn't just in his strategy, it was in his ability to remain unmoved while others panicked. That same principle applies today. Women often test men emotionally, not because they want to destroy them, but because they want to measure them. Can you hold your frame? Can you remain calm when chaos hits? If you explode, they lose respect. If you collapse, they lose attraction. But if you remain composed, you become magnetic, because you've proven you're stronger than their storms. The psychology of detachment. Humans crave what they cannot fully access. When you give all your emotions away instantly, she has nothing left to wonder about. She knows exactly where she stands. The game ends. But when you reveal selectively, when she feels warmth sometimes but mystery others, she leans in. She invests. She obsesses. Detachment works because it creates imbalance. She invests emotionally while you remain steady. She spirals in doubt while you stand calm. And this imbalance keeps her chasing. It's not manipulation, it's biology. Storytelling. Hook. The argument picture. A couple arguing. The average man raises his voice, defends himself, tries to win. He looks desperate, emotional, weak. The detached man listens calmly. He speaks slowly, precisely. He doesn't try to win because he doesn't need to. His calmness frustrates her more than shouting ever could. And in her frustration, something strange happens. Her respect for him grows because she sees what most women rarely see: a man who cannot be shaken. That calmness is not coldness, it is sovereignty. And sovereignty is irresistible. The fortress of self-sufficiency. At the heart of emotional detachment lies one principle. You do not depend on anyone else for your emotional reality. You don't need her validation to feel strong. You don't collapse if her affection fades. Your mood is not dictated by her attention. You are a fortress. Your center is unshakable, and women are magnetically drawn to that. Because in a world where most men beg to be understood, to be loved, to be validated, you are different. You are sovereign. You are rare. And what is rare becomes valuable. Elevation through restraint. Detachment is not apathy. It is refinement. It is knowing you could be swept away by emotion, but choosing not to be. It is the difference between the ordinary man, ruled by his feelings, and the Machiavellian man, who rules his feelings. One collapses, the other commands. And here's the paradox. Women don't want to be your emotional crutch. They want to prove themselves worthy of breaking through your fortress. This is why detachment elevates you above the masses. Because while most men drown in their emotions, you master them. Cliffhanger into Rule 5. But even emotional detachment is not the final stage, because power in relationships is not maintained by affection alone. The most ruthless and effective principle comes last. The paradox that keeps her endlessly invested. The double-edged sword that makes her feel like royalty, yet reminds her she is not irreplaceable. This is the final and sharpest weapon of all. Machiavelli warned, "It is not titles that honor men, but men that honor titles." In other words, what people value is not what you give them, but how you position yourself. And this brings us to the final and most ruthless rule of all. Rule 5. Treat her like the most special woman alive, while never letting her forget she is not irreplaceable. The double-edged sword. Most men fall into one of two traps. The first trap is worship. They treat her as their world, pouring endless affection, validation, and devotion into her. At first, she feels flattered, but soon the devotion loses all value. Once she realizes she is the unquestioned center of his existence, she gets bored. Certainty kills passion. The second trap is indifference. Some men swing to the opposite extreme. Cold, distant, withholding, to the point of cruelty. This may spark curiosity for a while, but without the illusion of being special, she eventually retreats in search of warmth. The Machiavellian man chooses neither. He wields both. He makes her feel chosen, rare, elevated, but deep in her subconscious, she knows he could walk away at any moment. She feels adored, yet slightly insecure, loved, yet never entitled. That contradiction is the sharpest blade of all. Why it works. Human psychology is built on tension. We crave security, but we are addicted to uncertainty. When you treat her as special, but remind her she could be replaced, you activate both. She feels elevated, basking in your attention, but she also feels the shadow of loss, which keeps her working to maintain her place. Machiavelli advised rulers to balance generosity with fear. Give just enough to inspire loyalty, but never so much that your subjects forget you hold the sword. This principle, applied to desire, keeps a woman endlessly invested. Storytelling. Hook, the queen. Imagine a queen in a royal court. The king showers her with jewels, affection, and honor. She feels like the most important woman alive, and yet she knows the truth. There are other noble women who would gladly take her place. She is elevated, but never entitled, adored, but never secure. What does this do? It keeps her loyal. It keeps her attentive. It keeps her endlessly working to maintain the crown. That is the paradox you must master. The subtle signals. You cannot announce this rule directly. You cannot say, you are special but replaceable. That would break the illusion. Instead, it must be woven subtly into your behavior. Rare compliments. When you praise her, it carries weight because it is not constant. Selective time. She receives your presence as a gift, not a guarantee. Public sovereignty. When others respect you, she sees your value is recognized beyond her. Private balance. You show affection, but never obsession. Care, but never collapse. These signals communicate one unspoken truth. You are chosen, but not entitled. And that truth makes her cling tighter. The public effect. This rule becomes even more powerful in public. When she sees other women drawn to you, when she notices you move through the world with confidence, when she realizes your value is recognized beyond her, her sense of urgency heightens. You are the prize. She feels proud to be by your side, but also aware she must continue earning that place. Machiavelli taught that appearances mattered more than intentions. A prince could be cruel in private, but if he appeared generous in public, he maintained power. The same applies here. Your public presence reinforces your private leverage. The balance of love and leverage. This rule is not about cruelty. It is about balance. If you give too much certainty, she coasts. If you give no certainty, she leaves. But if you balance elevation with uncertainty, she invests endlessly. She becomes more feminine, more attentive, more seductive, not because you forced her, but because you created the conditions that make her want to. This is the highest form of power, not manipulation, but calibrated perception. The 5 rules united. Let's step back and connect everything. Silent power. Your presence, not your words, commands respect. Scarcity. Your absence fuels desire more than constant presence ever could. Frame control. You define reality calmly and unshakably. Emotional detachment. You feel deeply, but reveal selectively. The illusion of exclusivity. You treat her like royalty, but remind her, silently, that she is not the throne itself. Together, these 5 rules transform you from ordinary into unforgettable. From someone who chases to someone who is chased. From someone disposable into someone irreplaceable. The ruthless reality. Now let me tell you the truth. Society won't. You were trained to lose. You were trained to overgive, over-explain, overexpose. And the more you did, the less you were valued. But Machiavelli's wisdom reveals the opposite. People respect what they cannot control. They desire what they cannot fully have. They chase what feels rare. That is why these rules work. They are not tricks. They are timeless laws of human nature. The closing challenge. So ask yourself, will you keep playing the game by the weak rules society taught you? Or will you embrace the ruthless rules that flip the board in your favor? Machiavelli wrote for princes, rulers, and leaders. But his words were never just about kingdoms. They were about human nature. And human nature has not changed. The game is being played whether you acknowledge it or not. The only question is, are you the pawn or the strategist? Final call. If you dare to see the world as it truly is, not as you wish it to be, then you belong here. Subscribe to Ruthless Psychology and join a community that studies the hidden rules of power, desire, and influence. Leave your thoughts below. Do you think Machiavelli was right? Or was he too ruthless? Either way, remember this. You don't beg for power, you create the conditions where power comes to you. Not because you demanded it, not because you pleaded for it, but because you became the man who could not be ignored.